Tales of the Legion Project podcast, Legion of Superheroes by Bendis and Sook, issues 1 through 6. And welcome back to the Legion Project podcast. This is episode 9 of the Tales of the Legion Project podcast. I am Peter.
And I am Eric.
And we are here to talk about not the Baxter run, which is why we're doing this in a Tales episode, but to talk about the quote-unquote current, or maybe I should say the most recent Legion of Superheroes series that started in late 2019, only ran for 12 issues. We are going to cover issues 1 through 6 in this episode.
Yeah, not to be confused with with maybe is the most current title that is currently at the time of this recording being published, which is the Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes.
Right, yeah. This volume is referred to as volume number 8. I have some thoughts about that. But the Tales part of our Legion Project podcast allows us to move away from the 80s into wherever it is we want to go. And where we want to go this episode is 2019.
Yeah, we're like 4 decades later now.
Yeah, right. We went to the future. We will definitely name more of the creative team as we get into the issues in a bit. I don't want to just single out Bendis and Sook, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to... we did cover issue 1 in a previous Tales podcast. I think it was even shortly when the first issue had shipped.
Yeah, shortly after that.
Yeah, and we wrapped it up into a larger discussion of not only the first issue, but also where we got a chance to look at other reboots. Most notably the 0 Hour reboot and then the Mark Waid, Barry Kitson reboot, the 3-boot. And we were able to compare and contrast, and it was really an episode about Legion first issues, if you want to call it that, you know. So people can go back and listen to that. You know, there's definitely some, in-depth conversation about issue 1. But this episode, we're going to try to talk about all 6, as a whole, and then maybe some finer points. And I have questions, and, we're going to see how this conversation goes.
Mm-hmm.
This has been something we've been waiting for a while. Eric has read these issues. You're on your, second read, third read by now?
Yeah, so at least the second for these first 6 issues, for sure.
Okay. And I realized I read at least the first 3, and then I had stopped. And now reread the first 3 again, read the second 3. So I'm all caught up, at least for issue 6. I do not know anything about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Interesting.
So, you're going to have, if I say some things, I'm sure you're probably going to have some interesting thoughts about, those later issues, Well, I have not read them. So
that depends on how much my memory serves me. And here lately, it does not do a good job.
Yeah.
I'm about ready to fire my memory.
Oh, no.
Well, but I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Since you just said this, you read the first 3 issues and stopped. Is that an indication of the quality of the series as a whole, the first 6 issues, I mean, or was it other factors that were involved that got you sidelined from reading the other 3 until now?
I think it was just that I knew we were eventually going to read
and
podcast about this, and I thought, I'll just wait.
Okay.
It wasn't one of those top of the stack kind of reads for me, and there's so much dialogue, and yet there's very little that happens issue to issue that I was forgetting what not not even really forgetting. I was just like eh, is it worth reading issue to issue? That's one of my questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is it worth reading issue to issue? Is it better? Part of the reason why we're doing it this way is because if you're getting the trades, or if you're interested in the trade, I'm sure there's a trade of just the first 6 and the second 6. I don't know. Did they do a trade of all 12 yet?
No.
Okay.
In fact, the first trade, which is subtitled Millennium, which can give you a pointer there, they included the first 2-issue. Well, so they included the Legion of Superheroes Millennium 2-issue mini that introduced Rose. What's her last name, Peter? Forrest. Thank you. Forest for the trees. They introduced Rose Forrest and her trek through DC's future history, culminating in her arriving in the 31st century and the introduction of the Legion of Superheroes.
Right.
And so you get that, and then you get the next 6 issues in that first collection.
No Superman stuff in it, I wonder?
Not that I saw, no.
No. I think that's kind of important, the Superman.
Yeah. There were several of those Superman issues, and in fact, there was also, which I did not actually realize until just recently when I started reading stuff and looking up things for this discussion. There was an appearance of the Legion in a Supergirl issue as well. Yeah. So I had no idea. So obviously, I probably didn't do a good job of keeping track of where the Legion was appearing at that time, but I also blame DC a little bit for not promoting it better. I don't know.
I think one of the things we talked about in that previous episode is that we were talking about in lead-ups to that episode, was that the initial promotion was pretty good. It was pretty out there. And then once the series opened, then it sort of faded away.
Faded or disappeared.
Yeah.
Completely. I mean, if I wasn't getting the issues, if I wasn't already subscribed to get those issues, where were they cross promoting? Where were they? I'm sure there were ads and stuff that I'm not remembering, but it seemed like as soon as they launched that Millennium series and the Legion aspect of the Superman stories went away, it was persona non grata for the Legion in the modern DCU timeline.
Okay, well, let's dig in. Let's get in. We have 6 issues to go through. We probably won't be as detailed as we are when we do our normal Legion Project podcast, where we only really have 1 issue to focus on. Mm-hmm. We have 6, so
it should only take us 4 hours.
We'll probably talk some large points and then hit smaller things here and there, but yeah. So let's start. What do you got for us?
Am I doing summary for the series?
Sure.
Okay. Forgive this. This is Peter. I wrote this minutes before we got online to talk because I forgot to do it. All right. Legion of Superheroes. As I said, the collection is called Millennium, but the first 6 issues here. So John Kent, Superboy, the founder of Unity Day and what becomes the United Planets, is brought to the 31st century to join the Legion of Superheroes, a group of young people from across the galaxy who were inspired by the 21st century's greatest heroes. Ultra Boy, one of the members of the team, acquires the legendary trident of Aquaman from the Horaz and the magician Mordru, which the trident turns out to be a portal containing the oceans of old Earth. The Legion insists that Superboy experience their orientation program in order for John to better acclimate himself to this new world, which also gives John and us background on how the team was formed. The Horaz then attack Earth with the trident, and the Legion defeats them, but not before Earth's oceans are restored. The president of the United Planets, R.J. Brand, wants to celebrate this development, but Ultra Boy's father, Krav the General Na, who also sought the trident, renounces his membership in the United Planets and threatens war. And I'm sure I missed some things along the way there, but I tried to keep it as brief as possible.
I mean, I tend to take very detailed notes, obviously, when we do those other episodes. And in this one, I started to, and then I really kind of just tried to hit bullet points as opposed to page by page stuff.
That's what I did too.
Yeah, and I came up with the first issue is both Superboy and our introduction to, if you hadn't read anything previously, to the Legion of Superheroes, to New Earth, to some hints of why they wanted to get Superboy in, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the second issue, if the first issue was a setup, the second issue is shows how a large group like this has trouble navigating what to do because it's so large, right? So the second issue is more about like, we have a situation. Okay, let's discuss, let's debate. They finally get to that, they make a decision of what to do while we still are being introduced to the team, because the second issue, really nothing really happened. The third issue is really the one what I was saying before about, okay, we have all these places we need to go to. We need to split up. Rimbor, talking to Mordru, Superboy goes and gets Damian, and everything goes bad. Like all three of those things go south because they're so brand new and they just don't know what to do, and they're young and they're overwhelmed. 4 and 5 are the origin of the Legion of Superheroes, more in issue 5 than issue 4, and it's acclimating Superboy to their origin, but also to new readers. And then number 6 is kind of like the culmination of certain threads throughout the first 5 issues. It's the action issue, quote unquote. Not only about the Trident, but some things about the president, etc. And then, like, out of nowhere, it resolves like in between the gutters and then leaves us on a cliffhanger for whatever's going to be for the next 6. So that's how if I had to do a synopsis of what I felt about each issue. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good summation of each issue. Yeah.
Let me give some, you want to give some general thoughts? Should we go to general thoughts now?
Yeah,
you think?
Let's do that.
All right, I'll start since you've read these, and we'll see what you have to say. One person on Twitter, when I posted, did anybody have any thoughts on this? This was Sean, right, from the Secret Wars and Beyond podcast, right?
Yep.
Wrote, I was so excited to have the Legion back. The art is great and there are fun moments, but ultimately the story feels really decompressed. It doesn't have real tension and fails to introduce most of the characters in a meaningful way. So that comment about decompressed is a word that we've been dealing with since Bendis took over Avengers way back in, 2000, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like a bad word in comics, right? When something is decompressed, people are like, ugh, it's decompressed. They're writing for the trade. They stretch this story out. We make jokes when we read like a story in the 80s. We're like, oh, if this was written in the 2000s, instead of being 2 issues, it would be 8 issues.
Yep.
And most of the times, I don't like to use that word because I do think it's a shorthand for, sometimes it's falsely labeled fake news, sometimes it's not the word they're really looking for. However, I do agree with it this time around.
Okay.
But it's odd because it's not decompressed in its dialogue.
No.
Right? You can't say it's decompressed in its dialogue. And it is a cast of thousands, so part of me is like, it has to play out like this. But when you look at the plot points of A to B to C, we got to A to B, and then we barely got out of that, right? Like it just there's very little that actually happens in a book where a lot of things happen and a lot of things don't happen.
Yeah.
So I also don't know how they could have done anything differently without Bendis going against his normal writing style.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that made for a frustrating read because there's so much to read and yet there's so little that happens sometimes. I will say that the issue 5 origin story stuff, I kind of like that. And there are scenes and moments, like Sean said, there are scenes and moments that I do like. There are things that I really do like, but there's a lot that just kind of drifts away. It just falls away. Like the Robin thing. It's in issue 3, and then that's it. Like it may come around again, but okay, whatever. The the biggest one, and we've talked about this before, Rose Forrest. What the heck? Like, why even introduce that character in the prologue series if you're barely going to she's used as a spokesperson, a liaison. She's kind of like the Siobhan Aaron of this comic. And for the amount of weight they put on her to be inspirational for the Legion, she is not part of their origin. And that's frustrating. I don't know if that plays out in the remaining issues. A lot of new characters. Issue 6 says, meet the new recruits, Dr. Fate, Gold Lantern, Superboy, Monster Boy. We saw Monster Boy. We saw what Gold Lantern could do. In that issue, we did not see Dr. Fate do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these characters, and we don't really get to see them. We get to hear them, but we don't get to see them do a lot.
Yeah.
And if they do a lot, it's just a bunch of generic big fight scenes, and you see some of their powers, but you don't get to hone in on what they are. So there are 40 balls being juggled in this book, and the ones that I want never get back down to the hands, right? They're always like up in the air somewhere. And it's like, when do we get to grab them and stay with them longer, you know? So I'm really frustrated by this book.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my big thoughts.
Something you just said sparked a thought here. If you think about, considering that we are examining the Baxter run issue by issue in the way that we are, you'll notice in those issues that Levitz and company often will focus on a few of the characters, and have a few of those plot lines running through each issue, but we rarely get an issue that is focused on the entire team, except for maybe a shot or two, right? And I from my recollection of reading even older issues of the Legion, that seemed to be the case for that too. I wonder if Bendis was trying to not only break that mold, but trying to figure out a way to do what I think Levitz and other writers and artists involved with the Legion have already proven works well, which is you can't have an entire issue with every character of the Legion, because we're talking 30 plus. I think I counted 34 Legionnaires.
Wow.
And then the supporting cast members involved in this, or secondary cast members in the series. That's way too many characters to focus a whole story on.
Right.
Not to mention, we got a bunch of newer, like you just mentioned, we got a bunch of newer type of Legionnaires. But we have the more familiar ones too, but they're different. And how is this future different? How is this different from before? And so all those juggling, that's a great metaphor for this. I think Bendis was just trying to juggle way too many of those balls, and was not doing a good job of it. And who knows what else was going on behind the scenes. It's obvious if you have read Legion of Superheroes Millennium and what it seemed like they wanted to do with Legion or DC's future history, and in particular Rose Forrest, her involvement in all of this, that seemed to have changed. And I don't know if that's on Bendis's part or DC's part. And then, it just kind of, I don't want to use this word, but devolves from there.
And maybe some of it is reader reaction, right? Maybe some of it is reader response, sales response, where they did the 2 Millennium issues and they were like, maybe we need to cut back on the roasting. Now, I'm looking at the schedule. Issue 1 came out in November of 2019. Issue 6 came out in June of 2020. It had a little bit of a gap there because of the pandemic, right? It went from March to June, issue 5 to issue 6. Now, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was created during the pandemic, right? Like it probably, issue 6 was wrapped up maybe right as the pandemic was starting in March of 2020. So at least for these 6 issues, they're going in with their original ideas, right? They're going in with the idea of whatever. You could probably even say that for the next couple issues too, until it really starts to get affected by. I think the outcome of this, what they may have wanted to do, and which is why we're only getting it now, the whole Justice League and Legion of Superheroes, the Great Darkness thing, because Bendis wanted to do Great Darkness and Williamson wanted to do Great, I think that they had to change some of those ideas, those big ideas, and bring it on together, right? I think so. Here's a question. This what you said about too many characters. I totally agree. I wrote in my notes here, it's not fair, but I feel like Bendis should have taken a page from Levitt's. Short sequences, multiple plot points, not everyone in every scene. Focus on, I think issue 1 does that really well because we're only introduced right away to Ultra Boy and Karate Kid and Starboy and Wildfire. So you get to see their powers. Are they the same like we know? And we're obviously talking about this book as longtime Legion fans. I have comments about how to read this if you're not a longtime Legion fan, but we'll talk about that later. So it introduced those characters, and then we got Saturn Girl with Superboy. We got some interpersonal stuff, which gave us some character stuff, which was great. We then rarely got that as we go on. Every now and then you would get a little dip into some character stuff. Even the opening splash pages on some of the issues, like with Dawnstar and Cosmic Boy, okay, that's good. We get, I actually liked those, even though they, they are what they are. So I said, did he need to take a page from the Levitt stuff and try to give us multiple plots that then weave into a bigger story by issue 6, so then I have to think, well, why did he want the entire team and why did he want Superboy? And, it's a Legion of Superheroes book. Part of me then went, what if they would have entitled this Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes? Because the focus, we do get Superboy through all this, right? Then I think it might pull the impulse that I have to explore the Legion and make myself explore it through Superboy instead of the Legion. Does that, you know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. One of my complaints about this series, generally speaking, was I felt like they focused too much on Superboy.
Oh, interesting.
So, but I totally understand what you're talking about. That, it's this push and pull that we're getting. I think that the creators may have struggled with, and we're kind of picking up on that because, it's there's just so much history here, so much backstory, so much baggage that, I'll go back to something that you've said multiple times on the show when we were discussing this new Legion book coming, when it was announced and whatnot. I believe, I should let you speak for yourself, but you basically said something to the effect of that they should just go another 1,000 years in the future and just totally redo it from the ground up, all new characters, all different concepts, that kind of a thing, right? And instead we get things that are very familiar to us with a few cosmetic changes.
Yeah,
really. So it's there's just all this stuff, this baggage, like I said, that's playing into this, and and obviously we weren't as satisfied with it as perhaps DC Comics would like us to be, and compound that by everybody else, and who knows what the sales were, but there's just a lot to do here, and still try to have a touchstone with what came before. So I don't envy what Bendis and Sook were trying to accomplish in the way that they were trying to accomplish. I think but I think they were trying to do way too much of that. Let's make it as familiar as possible while still trying to blaze new ground. And there was just way too much of that kind of, dare I say, fan service.
Yeah, because I tried to think of this in terms. So I thought of it in two ways. If a new reader was reading this, a new reader to the Legion, not new to comics, but just to the Legion, what do they focus on?
Yeah.
I guess you just focus on the plots, and maybe as being, us being longtime Legion fans, we're trying to dig too much in when we really should just read it and take the plot points as they come, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's not the fun of the Legion. The fun of the Legion is to know what planets they are from and what powers they have. And Superboy says it's to Robin in issue 3. Like, he's like, it's really great. Everybody's from a different planet. Everybody has one power. Okay, good. That's Legion. But then we don't necessarily get to see it in play. Mm-hmm. We get hints of it. Like, Superboy says to Bouncing Boy, wow, you're really strong, when they're trying to push him back into the computer device so he can learn about the Legion. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. We even see a fight scene with Bouncing Boy, like going boom, 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 like really just knocking people out. And then Superboy says he's strong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where else can I get that? I can't, then there's nothing else from it, right? It's little hints here and there, right? Saturn Girl tries to make everybody fall asleep, but she can't. She's not so specific in that power, and winds up making other Legionnaires fall asleep too. Like, okay, there's something fun about that. Can we push that a little more somewhere? But so that's coming from a longtime reader, right? Someone new to the Legion, does any of that mean anything to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just going to push back on that by the idea of, well, this stuff has to unfold in a normal situation. And if you're introducing a new superhero team, you would unfold these ideas, these plot points, these character moments over time. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. That's how Bendis is approaching this. Little snippets here, little pieces there. And allowing Sook to drive the story a certain way through the visuals that he's created.
Sure.
But it goes back to what I was saying about that push and pull, right? For there's just so much to it that you get lost. And I think that applies to both longtime readers like us and the new ones. What do you focus on? Like, I think you said that.
Or who do you focus on? Yeah.
Exactly. Besides Superboy, it's like it's kind of like your description of Bouncing Boy in that one scene where he's pinging off everything, right? That's how I felt as a reader.
Yeah.
And I've been reading the Legion for 35 something years.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if we got it with Monster Boy, right? We got when they're doing the big evacuation in the issue 5 and 6 or issue 6. And he's turned into a big, it almost looked like a Mars Attacks kind of monster. Yes. And they're like, maybe you shouldn't pick something so scary while everybody's in a panic. And he's like, look, I don't get to choose what form I get to take in a situation like this. So you just need to, stop being so speciesist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's two panels, and in a Paul Levitz thing, we probably would have nodded. I don't want to compare. I'm sorry, but we probably would have got a little more conversation. So it's weird. That's why I go back to that whole thing. It's decompressed, and yet it's not, because that's not decompressed. That's like super compressed. So that's why I said, okay, is maybe it should be called Superboy and Legion. Then I was like, should this effing book should have just been it should have just been something else completely. It shouldn't have been Legion at all. Right? Like I feel like in many ways that's the hard thing about it being a Legion longtime Legion reader and coming to this. It's like just make it different. Just make it different. Don't make it Legion, because you're tickling me and it's not fair. So then I was like, and I guess we're still talking general thoughts here. Then I was like, maybe I'm being too hard, because I would love a comic book reader to reach, if someone is listening, I can't imagine they're listening to this if they don't already read Legion, but I would love to find a comic book reader that has never read any Legion ever, not to read this, to read the first 6 issue of the Baxter run. And I want to see if I don't want to, don't give them any kind of I'm not giving you any instructions. I'm not going to, just read it, come back, and then I'll ask you questions. Because then I want to see, are those 6 issues as impenetrable as these 6 issues if they were a new does it have the same thing? Do you look at characters and go, well, I don't know who that is? Are their powers explored? It's this big battle with the Legion. It's a lot of characters, right? I want to see if I'm being unfair to this, or, because I'm allowing certain prejudices or biases or whatever, or is it just the nature of this giant of a team and this kind of concept that's why people stay away? But then part of me goes, why are there so many X-Men fans? Because there are 1,000 X-Men fans and 1,000 X-Men books.
Right.
And nobody, not many people reading X-Men started with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, X-Men number 1. Mine was issue 180 or 181, And even the Baxter issue is sort of unfair, because that is written with the knowledge that there's another Legion title, that there's history. So I don't know, maybe somebody has to read the first 6 of Mark Waid's, or you know what I mean? Maybe they need to go into another reboot. And is it as impenetrable to a non-Legion like I feel this would be? The ones that we think are great. That's what I'm trying to get to. Like, we love those issues. Maybe somebody loves these issues.
Yeah.
And I'm being too much of a stick in the mud about them.
Oh my God. Know. So many thoughts now based on what you just said. So, okay. First of all, just to touch on your X-Men thing, I'm actually going through that because I'm reading Hickman written X-Men in trade. And I've never really read a lot of X-Men ever. And so I'm coming into this with a bajillion characters, like with this book, right? In fact, I just recorded an episode to come out soon where I'm talking about volume 3 and about specific characters that I had no knowledge of whatsoever until I read them on that page. And I'm like, well, who is this? What's their powers and all this stuff?
Sure.
But I got it by reading through it. So that's a really good point. Which leads me to the next one. When you mentioned those first 6 issues of the Baxter run, I'm like, oh yeah, there are some similarities here in terms of plot. So that would be a good comparison. But I love your idea about. I think the Wade Kitson Legion is probably the better comparison to make, right? Because it's a new start. It's a fresh start. It's a new takes on familiar characters.
Right.
I think that'd be a perfect way to approach this. And so then I guess it really comes down to, doesn't it? The skill of the storytellers. Because now, Peter, I think I have to stop us here and then go read those Wade Kitson issues, because now I'm really
Well,
curious.
and as we said at the top of this episode, when we did that previous Tales episode on this first issue, and we compared it to Zero Hour and we compared it to Wade and Kitson's first issue, the one we liked the most was Wade and Kitson.
Yeah.
Because it gave us the Legion stuff. It gave us a really good premise. It even opened with kind of like a Millennium thing where we saw a tour through the ages until we got to the 30th century or 31st century. And we also got good character stuff and some good characterization.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we came at it with previous Legion history and it still was written, I that's the trouble. You can't write Legion as a reboot without bringing in prior baggage, because Bendis even said he loved before he wrote this, he was reading tons of Legion and coming, it's almost like maybe that's what also needs to happen. We need to get a creative team that has never read a Legion book ever. And just, there's one concept, one thing, Legion of Superheroes, a future team inspired by Superman in or the Age of Heroes in the 20th century. Go.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that is supposedly the driving force behind this series, or at least that's what we're told.
Yeah.
So, that's
there.
And to the final thing that I didn't get to answer your question, because I think it's pertinent to what we just said. To answer your question, about are we bringing too much to it versus I forget what the second part of what you said there, but the answer was yes.
Yeah.
It's both. So what do we do with this now, Peter?
We never read it again. Ugh.
I will say, I, having read it now the second time, and then of course rereading parts as I was taking notes and whatnot, other than the issues that we have with this series, or these first 6 issues anyway, as a whole, I actually liked it better than what I remember when I read it the first time, month to month as it was coming out.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm going to be hard on this book, but reading it as a whole is so much better than reading it as issue to issue, because issue to issue, all you do is focus on what is wrong or what's not there. And it's pain. It's hard. It's hard to read it like that.
So what were the elements or pieces, or what were the things that you were on the reread that you felt better about the series generally? What were those things that kind of made it worthwhile? Maybe that's too strong of a word.
No, I understand. For me, the if I go, by little points, the Trident thing, even when we covered the first issue way back, turned out to be exactly what was going to happen. That Aquaman's Trident, because New Earth is just a series of domed cities with no water, and then there was something happened to Earth way back when. You bring in the Aquaman's Trident. They even mentioned that it could, help worlds and create oceans, and it has all the oceans in it. I knew eventually, okay, then the Legion are going to go. I think I even said it. Maybe it's the restoration of the oceans that makes the Legion more accepted in the world and in the galaxy. And that is kind of what happened by issue 6, because Madam President is like, President Brand is saying to Joe Na's Ultra Boy's father, look, you might have problems about what exactly happened with this Trident, but meanwhile, you stole it, they stole it, so that cancels that out. And they brought back something to this world that was sorely missing, hope, by putting the oceans back,
Right.
So I was like, okay, even though I knew that was what was going to happen, by the end of it, it was like, okay, does that also soften the president, who was not happy that they brought in Superboy? Even though, because this is where those juggling balls get a little weird. Even though in the origin it was her idea to create the Legion in the first place, just like in other continuity, her name is Brand, just like in other continuity, she's just an alien or different gender, if that's even what they are. I don't know. But somewhere along the line, something happened. And we still don't know what that something happened is. We were supposed to get that in that orientation, and Superboy just never got to that point. So she was not happy with the Legion throughout these issues. But because they restored the oceans, now things, okay. But I'm like, but then are we going to get where the strife came from?
Yeah.
Or is that going to be another one of those points that Bendis just lets go? And that's going to frustrate me.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that I really liked, and this might be an answer to everything that we've been talking about. It is in issue number 5. It's the second part of the origin, where we see that after the Trinity, the first person to join the team was Block.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? And then the second person is Brainiac 5, because Saturn Girl's like, okay, we're going to do this. We need to do smart. And if you got smart, if you need smarts, then you got to go to Kolu and you got to get Brainiac 5. Okay. So he has this is the most interesting stuff to me. And it also is Bendis he's playing around in it in Young Justice. He's playing around with it in Justice League, and he wants to hit this baby so hard. Where Brainiac starts talking about, okay, the Age of Heroes, the lost and broken Earth lore you are modeling the Legion after is my obsession. Brainy is basically saying to the Trinity why he thinks this is a good idea and why he thinks it's an important idea. And then he says, I have facts that show it is then that era that holds us all together. Cosmic Boy says all. Brainiac 5 says all times, all realities, all dimensions. The mixtures of multiversity, powers sources, sciences, and magic, and those looking to us and abuse all and those looking to us and abuse all of it. This must stay with us. I have growing data of severe reality abnormalities at the edges of our galactic, and I have discovered it is all connected to the age 1,000 years ago, to this age 1,000 years ago. Simply put, as long as that era survives itself, we will. If it does not, all this will all simultaneously disappear, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. In a very meta way, I was like, oh, this is almost a comment of every Legion reboot. That, and I think I've said this before, either on this show, I know I said it on a Crisis Tapes. The reason why the quote-unquote present, meaning the 21st century, is so important in all of these Crisis stories is because that's where the creators live. So, of course, the Legion is always going to be affected. And we are always going to have a different Legion, which is almost what Brainiac 5 is saying here.
Mm-hmm.
It's because whatever happens back then, that Earth is the most important part of all time. Whether it's the 20th century, like the original Crisis, or the 21st century, like Final Crisis and whatever we're getting now, because there was also a comment about in issue 1 about New Earth, and someone says, they talk about the destruction of New Earth, and they said, what happened to Earth is so upsetting. A lot of lessons have been learned. Chameleon Boy says, if you take a wider perspective, we like to think that the Earth, after all those trials and tribulations and revamps and reboots, that Earth survived, right? So again, I was like, oh, we made mention of that word reboot, and I was like, oh, see, that is so interesting. By the 31st century, the Earth is so weakened because it's probably been through hundreds of crises by then. If you go back to, let me put my Crisis Kid hat on, right? If you go back to the original Crisis, it opens with the origin of the multiverse, and it specifically says what should be one became many. By issue 10 or 11 of the Crisis, they do that origin again, and now it's all one Earth, right? And they said what was many has become one. And it actually visually is larger on the page than those multiple Earths from issue 1. George Perez drew it, larger. Then you could say, okay, an Infinite Zero Hour messed with time, but really it was Infinite Crisis that again kind of created a new Earth. And Morrison's Final Crisis, you started to get this whole thing called the Orrery of Worlds, where our Earth was down on the bottom and the other Earth sort of triangled up, right? And if you knocked off like Earth's in the top of the triangle, fine. But if you knocked out that one Earth down on the bottom, everything crashes.
The source point.
So, in one hand, that Earth has to be so strong. On the other hand, by the time you get to the 31st century, it is so weak, right? And I'm probably pulling way more out, but you said what are the things that kind of I latched on? That's what I latched on.
Yeah.
That Brainiac kind of is living in an existence where he's like, we are just who we are now because of what the 21st century was then, but that can change at any minute. Which means this Legion can change at any minute, which is exactly what it happens every time there's an effing crisis that goes on.
Yeah.
So what do you think of those thoughts?
Do you think, is that just Bendis being clever and throwing in this meta commentary, or I guess, is he trying to build up to something? And I think that's you already said that earlier. I think that's the case, but I don't know. Is it earned? What's the importance of it? How does it connect to the 21st century? And I guess that's why we have the Justice League versus Legion of Superheroes series going on right now.
Yeah. And you read the next 6 issues, so, does what I'm saying even play out in those issues? I don't know. And whatever happened because of the pandemic and whatever happened because of their plans and sales,
right.
Yeah, I think that comment that Brainiac says about something on the edge of the galaxy, that's obviously a hint, and probably a hint to the Great Darkness and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they only are getting around to it 2 years later, 2 point something later, because this is 2019. Well, to be fair, issue 5 came out in 2020, so 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and I know, even though I haven't finished Young Justice, I know there was a lot of multiverse stuff in that.
There was, yeah. So another thing that, since we're talking about this, I agree. This aspect of the Legion, this is when it became more than just, oh, we have the Legion back, and here's all these characters, and here we're being introduced to these different versions of these familiar characters. It became more than just a group of superheroes. There was some. I think this is where we're getting a little bit of weight to the series as a whole.
Yeah,
but it's so tied directly to the past, and we get, and obviously with Superboy being there, but that makes sense because they've set it up in this new reality of DC Comics that he is the reason instead of his father for being the inspiration. And it's not just him, because they talk about the Age of Heroes.
Right.
It's and they've done this before with Legion's past, where they've tried to decentralize the reason for their existence as not being just Superman. and you can have or take objection to that as you will, which I do, but it makes sense. I mean, the superhero aspects of DC Comics is more than just Superman, even though he's the origin point. And so, yeah, like I said, there's more to it than that. I was talking about the past. I'm sorry. I meant to also talk. Superboy brings in Robin, right? So we got the Batman Superman connection there, right? We get a little tidbit of Robin, because of the way the Legion reacts to Robin, and what Chameleon Boy even says about him, which was, he wouldn't joke about Hitler, or he makes some sort of Hitler reference in relation.
Hitler.
Baby Hitler, yeah. to Robin, which is like, whoa, what's we get little tidbits like that, but that's what I mean, though, is that between Superboy and Robin and the connection to the 21st century and what Brainiac 5 reveals to the Trinity here, I don't know. It just there's to me there's too much. That's what I meant by the comment of my earlier comment about there's too much Superboy, is that there's too much connection to the past. It makes the Legion itself completely secondary to whatever's going on here. And I realize that's part of the game, but it's, with what we had, what we were examining in the main Legion Project podcast, pretty much they just left them alone. And they developed that corner of the DC universe as time went on. And rarely did we have any kind of direct connection, and except for the few times that the Legion would go back in the past and guest star in somebody's book. So I don't know. It's a different paradigm now, where, and I think part of this is Bendis doing this part, that everything has to connect, because if it connects, it has importance. But my reaction was, well, you're just making this concept, you're diluting this concept and making it less important by connecting it so much to the past.
Right. Between the Trident, between Rob Damien, between having a Dr. Fate character, have a Gold Lantern.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Superboy even says, I noticed you don't have any Batman-related characters here, I mean, to be fair, the entire Legion history up until 1980 was Superboy and,
that's true. Yeah.
And it took, until they finally made it Legion of Superheroes, and they said, all right, we got to get rid of Superboy.
But even Superboy was this separate thing from the rest of the DC modern time era, right? I mean, it was, so they broke a lot of things with Crisis.
I thought it was interesting that there was a comment that says, Superboy, who will be the one and true Superman. Mm-hmm. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
That was interesting. Obviously, that's Bendis's bias, probably.
Yeah. Are we going to ever see that, Peter? That's the question.
I mean, he does have his own title now,
Sure.
I mean, they're certainly pushing something, whether that sticks or not. And I guess really the point is, they went back in time to Unity Day because it was John Kent's idea in the Superman issues, which is why I think those issues are important.
Yeah.
And they talk about the importance of having Superboy here because of what they can learn. And then Superboy turns around and says, I think you guys are doing pretty well without me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they should have gone back to when he actually had some experience, not just dumb luck that he came up with Unity Day.
Right.
I mean, he did have experience at that point because he was older. He had just gone through his trials with Jor-El, and he was a couple years older now, and he had all that experience out in space, but it was educational in a school sense, not in sort of like a practical sense. Like he hadn't
a superheroic sense.
Yeah, like he hadn't really lived as a Superman like he is now in his title,
Yeah.
So maybe you pull that. Maybe they should have really waited and pulled him from 2028 instead of 2019.
So since we're talking about this, and the whole meta aspect that you brought up, so there was something, I forget which issue it is, where Brand is really ticked. Yeah, okay, here we go. In issue 2, Brand says one of the main jobs of the United Planets, and by extension her as the president, is to protect the space-time continuum from those who would abuse it. And yet the Legion completely flaunt that by going to get the inspiration for their team and the United Planets, right?
Right.
So that was it's, to me, that's kind of related to the thing that we've been talking about now for several minutes about the reboots and the meta aspect, right? But that aspect of it is like, wow, what, the United Planets was, we saw the birth of United Planets in this current DC continuity, and it had nothing to do with the space-time continuum, at least in the way that I'm interpreting her comment. So what has happened in the intervening 1,000 years? And I will say, I don't think we get that in the Legion of Superheroes Millennium 2 issue mini. It's just Rose journeying through those time periods. So what kind of connection is Bendis trying to make to this aspect of the United Planets was formed to, or exists currently anyway, to protect the space-time continuum? From what? From whom? Besides the general, those who would abuse it, as she says.
Right. I mean, it has to be the development of time travel, which happened way before the 31st century, unless it was time travel became more common by that time.
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with the destruction of Earth?
Yes.
And Bendis wanting to play around with some, you come to DC, you got to do a crisis. I mean, he wrote Secret Invasion, and he wrote. Did he write Siege? I can't remember. No, I can't remember. I thought he wrote another Marvel event. I mean, really, it was Hickman, the one who did that second Secret Wars, and that one was like like a crisis event. So maybe Bendis was like, I want to do a crisis, and this is how he sets it up. I can remember saying, please don't let him do a crisis. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's not quite there, and then you try to throw in, well, then what the heck was Rose Forrest? And I mean, I do like the idea that once that these characters were initially brought in to become part of, like, the young Republicans, basically, like they were meant to come in to be the young United Planet, the youthful, whatever the term was. I forget what it was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then immediately Saturn Girl's like, she has good intentions, but she's got us marked to be weapons, and I did like the three of them. See, that was one of those moments where it's just three characters talking, and Garth is very indecisive, and Rock is like, hey, I'm a champion, of course I need to be here. It was a nice little switch on their personalities. And then Saturn Girl's like, maybe we need to be, and then they do. They're like, well, let's just be something else. Let's be superheroes. Let's do something else. And then she does, the president does come in, and then they get attacked by the Horaz. And I was like, oh, that's okay. See, that's interesting. Well, I guess that was before that conversation. That at least is that Legion origin impulse, right? The whole reason the Legion was founded was because RJ Brand was attacked, and she saw these three heroes step up and save her, right? Or him, back in the original. So we did get that again, and then that's why she's like, oh, now I have a new thought. Maybe you need to be, this. She's the one who says, maybe you need to be the Legion, a Legion, my Legion, right? But it's the kids that go, okay, we can't do it under her. And there's even the scene where the science police in the present come to put them on lockdown, and they're all like, well, whose authority? And they're like, the president's. And they're like, we have autonomy. Like, I don't know. We were chartered as being, and I was like, okay, see, that's interesting to me, because that is Legion lore, that they're meant to kind of work alongside of. the law, if you want to say. So.
Yeah, but that really works in our version of the Legion because RJ Brand is an independent entity.
Sure.
He's a wealthy dude who can circumvent, bend perhaps the rules. But in this one, Brand is the president of the United Planets, and I guess I want a little bit more of that. Because we don't get what comes next in that history.
Sure.
How did they negotiate this autonomy that they claim to have? Considering that Brand is president and, therefore presumably under the aegis of the United Planets. So that's a minor point. I find I want to know these little bits and details. And yeah, it's only 6 issues, but we get an issue. Well, not even a full issue, but between 2 issues, we get an issue of the origin of the Legion of Superheroes, and we still don't have enough details for my taste.
And we know that there's only 6 more issues. It's not like this became an ongoing series like they initially wanted. It wraps up at 12. So it's like, how much more of everything that's laid out in these 6 issues can you really explore in the next 6?
Yeah.
To its end, If you know it's going to be an ongoing, then you can just keep those things going.
Well, I think that was the intent. But
sure.
Certain things obviously affected that, and now we're where we're at now.
They're going to say the pandemic, but it's like, no, it's just, this is not a, I really, you sort of want to, I know I said this, I made this comment one time, like on an old CGS episode. No creator goes into creating a book badly, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, nobody wants to go and, unless you're Mike Grell and you're trying to sabotage Tyrock, but nobody goes in and says, I'm just going to make this a mess. Maybe John Byrne does. I don't know, whatever. But I will say this. You also can't turn around and say to me that at the end of certain comics, when they are released, that an editor or writer, they have to go, nah, that wasn't good. Like if you're an artist, if you're a creator, I've done it plenty of times, like where you just, like in theater, when you're doing a show, a musical, and you have 10 numbers, 12 numbers that you got to choreograph within that musical. When you're starting to get down to the end, when it's almost opening night and you still got 2 more to do, usually you're like, I'm gonna, whatever that. Okay. It's not, I'll make it better if I ever do the show again, So I sort of want to sit down and go, the execution of this book is not poor when you think of the art.
Yeah.
And clearly, because I think you saw a script that Bendis did at one point or another. I think you sent me a link way back on Instagram or something like that. There is a script. There is stuff. There's thought behind this book. But so it's not like it's a poor book where, it's not like it's like, unreadable because the artwork doesn't make sense or whatever. There's like 1 or 2 panels that I was like, I have no idea what order I'm supposed to read these word balloons in, but okay. But you do want to sit Bendis down and go, you lost your way on this, right?
Yeah.
Come on. Like, be honest. Like, don't. Yes, I know what you wanted to do, but what came at, he has to look at this and go, I probably could have done something different, I would hope that he's smart enough to kind of say, that's what it came out to be, because that's certainly how I felt. Like I feel like this didn't go the way I think they wanted it to, which is unfortunate because it is a product. It is a lovely package. The artwork's beautiful. There are some scenes I really like, and some of the designs I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, I dig that. But then it's like, there's only so much of the wrapping you can enjoy before you got to get to the innards,
Yeah, the meat of it, yeah.
Yeah. What did you find that you enjoyed on your second read? Did we already touch on it, or was there anything I didn't cover? Like, what did you find?
Well, besides the larger ideas that they were trying to explore here, at least introduce, right? So something to hold on to in terms of this is interesting type thing. The thing that I like I said earlier on the second read through, I rather enjoyed being introduced to some of these characters. And obviously we don't get, because like I said, there are 34 of them, 34 Legionnaires, 36 if you count triplicate girls duplicates.
Right, sure.
Right. And speaking of, the reason I say that specifically is that was one of the characters that I quite enjoyed seeing. And it seemed like through the 6 issues, and I'm definitely going to be looking at this at the next 6, that character probably has more lines in the script than other characters, which leads me to believe that she was becoming a favorite of either Bendis or Sook or both. And then we also get, I forget which issue it is now, but those opening recaps, those splash page recaps that we get, I enjoy those quite a bit more because of the little tidbits about the characters themselves. Rock does one.
Dawnstar.
Like Dawnstar does. That was one of my favorites as well. And then Triplicate Girl also did one, or had one. And so it was that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, that's really cool. And we get or Saturn Girl. My God, so much focus on Saturn Girl, and considering what we are talking about in our Baxter Legion episodes, coming out of the through the Universal project, specifically relating to Saturn Girl, it was really interesting to see the focus on Saturn Girl in this series as well. Now, 40 years later.
Yeah.
Right. That character seems to inspire a lot of focus on these creators over time. And I just find that fascinating.
And she's the one I think that has existed in probably the purest form of a Saturn Girl than any of the other characters. Because I think in that first issue where she's time traveling with Superboy, and she says, she's trying to talk about the Legion, and he's like, wow, you're really formal. And she goes, yeah, I am. And it's like, yeah, because that's what they did, right? They talked in their Legion codes, and they talked about their charters, and they talked about their, always, we got to do this. Well, the leader's got to do this. And, that, especially in the Silver Age. And, she's not terribly different from, she's blonde. She's got the Saturn Girl colors, and, you can't even say her short hair is different because she had short hair in the Gary Frank, Paul Levitz, and Jeff Johns thing, like all that stuff. She had short hair. So I thought she was the one that was like kind of like the closest. Surprisingly, the other one, sort of the closest that we actually got some characterization from. I really thought Ultra Boy kind of hit a lot your boy, right? I thought you really hit some of the points of why you like the old Ultra Boy,
Yeah. I obviously I think we talked about this in that previous episode where we discussed issue 1. The fact that this relaunch of the Legion starts off with him.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And it didn't just end with that introduction of him pursuing and obtaining the Trident. There was more to it with his father, and the fact he apologizes to the team for joining without, I think he did, or am I confusing him with Chameleon Boy?
Yeah, he did. He
in a different issue. Yeah. And it was just really cool to see the focus on one of my favorite Legionnaires. So, but yeah, I agree. I felt like we were getting, I think, even a real different Jonah than we've seen before. But I will also preface that by saying there's not a whole lot of characterization to Jonah, even in our Baxter run Legion. So, in other words, he's a bit of a blank slate, whereas I don't think Saturn Girl is.
Right. And I think that's okay. I think we even talked about, like, it's nice to have some of the Legionnaires that, they're not a hothead, they're not an introvert, they're not an extrovert, they're like Ultra Boy's like, I'm a Legionnaire.
Yeah.
Yay. I have
Yeah.
a cute girlfriend. Yay. What more do I got? Awesome powers. Yay. And like, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay necessarily in this volume because everybody's a blank slate. Most of the
Yes.
characters are blank slate. So I want to
Yeah.
know, we got like Wildfire, who was, I still think this version of Wildfire is a girl, but we got Wildfire being Wildfire, right? But yet not being Wildfire, like apologizing for throwing their Wildfire on Mordru because then Mordru turned it around into a magic thing, and they're like, "Oops, sorry about that."
And cracking jokes.
Yeah, like going, I think we probably broke a whole bunch of laws, but he's like, I haven't read it yet. I haven't read the charter yet, so I don't know. Who else did we get? Oh, what did you think of, like, say for instance, Shadowless and Cosmic Boy being an item?
Yeah,
and the rest of the team going, what?
A pairing? Do they refer to as a pairing? And everybody's like, we didn't get the memo, essentially, right? Yeah, that was interesting. Right. But she is, this is, we've been complaining, criticizing some of how Bendis approaches things here in terms of characterization, but in just a few words, we get the idea she is a strong person in this interaction. She is definitely the stronger of the two in this relationship, because Cosmic Boy is just like, that poor guy is just way over his head, not in terms of the relationship with this new relationship with Shadowless, but being the Legion leader as well.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense. It's like a counterpoint to him being the champion of that sport on Braille, but then he comes here and he's like, he thinks he's gonna be the champion, but it's like, it's a little much. I also like, though, when they point out that they're paired. Mon-El was like, oh, this is news to me.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh, see, when you're a longtime Legion fan, you're
exactly
like, I get it.
Exactly.
And it was go ahead.
Mon-El also, well, no, I can't speak to that. Actually, I think that comes up in the next 6 issues. Never mind. Go ahead.
Where he's kind of in competition with Superboy?
Yeah, I see. You're right.
Here.
Okay, they do talk about that here. All right, yeah. And but there's I think it is right. It is in this where they're hinting they're hinting that or heavily suggest anyway that Mon-El is a descendant of John Kent's.
Right, because they say he says Superboy's like, oh yeah, we knocked him out, and Mon-El's knocked out Jonah's dad when he comes to Earth, and Mon-El's like, yeah, well, I did it first, basically. I did it first. And then he goes and flies off, and then one of the other characters, I don't know if it's a White Witch or whatever, says exactly what you said. Yeah, well, he's that way because he is your, and then it stops, and it's like, oh, come on, Bendis, come on. And it's like, okay, is he a descendant like you said, or is there, something else to it, which is a different dynamic, Are they really going to explore that? I don't know. I mean, unless they do in the next 6 issues, but that might be another plot point that just gets away from them because they don't have the coverage of it yet,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think Bendis is writing, for 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to get there.
No.
And maybe that's part of the problem, is that he was trying to do that, knowing that there's no guarantee, obviously. And so he's just trying to throw in everything he possibly could in the hopes that it would have a longevity so that he could come back to these things down the road.
So whose fault is that? Is that Bendis being too just having too many high hopes? Is it the intricacy of having someone like Ryan Sook on the book? Is it DC? Is it the Legion concept itself? Whose fault is it?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I always go back to when Roy Thomas was starting to write All-Star Squadron at DC. And his goal was to put all of those Golden Age stories together, make them make sense, right? Like the development of especially during the wartime of the Justice Society. And that's why he created the All-Star Squadron as a way to kind of bring those stories in and out of this new team, right? But he also wanted to do it in chronological order of the war. So All-Star Squadron went for what, 60, 70 issues?
Mm.
And he only covered 4 months of the war because he was trying to be so. I always go back and I go, Roy, how many issues of this book did you think you were going to write? 1,000? Because you only got barely past Pearl Harbor, and like you had years to go. It was like, Roy, snap it up here, and then Crisis happened and that was it. Forget it,
So wait, we had decompressed stories back then?
Well, I mean, if you think of it in a timeline sense, sure. But then you have things like, I wanted to bring up Starman, James Robinson's Starman, because there is a series that, the first year of it, there are so many seeds that do play out by the time you get to issue.
Oh, 8, yeah. Yep.
Or whatever it is. But I wanted to, there in the Stars My Destination story arc in Starman, which is the one story arc that most people thought went on a little too long. It's like right before the last two big story arcs. And Starman is out in space and he meets Adam Strange and blah, blah, blah. There's a subplot in there about the creation of the League of Planets, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah.
And that was meant to be kind of like an early precursor for the United Planets as well. And I don't know whatever became of it, if they touched on it in any other book. They might have, like in other James Robinson books, but I just don't remember. We're just in a day and age, books don't go to issue 100.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have...
Unless you're Batman.
Unless you're Batman, right. I was going to say, we have Nightwing heading there, but it's Nightwing. It's a Batman book. At least the DC thinks it's a Batman book, right? And it currently has an amazing creative team on it. So,
yeah.
The only book that went from the beginning of Rebirth that had other than like Tom King on Batman, was Joshua Williamson on Flash, where he was on that book for a long time.
Yeah.
And you don't get that. You don't get that often with DC and Marvel anymore. And so it's like, I don't know what they thought they were going to do with this book, but
yeah.
Was there anything, I think maybe I touched on it with the whatever is on the edge of the galaxy, but since you read the first issue of Justice League versus Legion of Super, is there anything else that I missed that these 6 issues touch on, or it's not until maybe the next 6?
Yeah, I don't think so. I can't recall that first issue, other than reintroducing the Legion in a way, and this whole darkness thing, that's going on. This is that issue probably is a good representation of the things I think we're not enjoying about this series.
And we should say that as we're recording it, there is a second one that has been out, but we haven't read it.
Yeah.
And they, like in this issue 6, when Gold Lantern finally makes his appearance, I'm Gold Lantern of the Galactic. They keep calling it the Galactic.
Yeah.
And Superboy's like, Gold Lantern. Someone says, he has such an amazing story. Wait till you hear it. The Lantern is coming. The Lantern is coming. And you get the sense that he is very powerful. And the Justice League Legion book is also supposedly supposed to be about Gold Lantern as well.
Yeah. There is a major focus on Gold Lantern in that first issue too. I think similar to how Ultra Boy introduces this series, or is the character that introduces this series. I think Gold Lantern is the character that introduces that setup as well, if I recall correctly.
The POV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing you just mentioned, the comment about Gold Lantern, he has such an amazing story. That's one of the things I actually liked on the reread as well, was this enthusiasm that the Legionnaires have. First, I think, are primarily shown by their reactions or their comments about Superboy coming. But then things like that, and there seems to be a lot of those things kind of peppered throughout that I don't know. I found it really um, comforting.
Yeah.
Just it's not all doom and gloom. I'm probably this is probably my pandemic reading reaction.
It's charming. It's charming
Yeah,
when
charming. Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
when
Yes.
Karate Kid's like, I'm Karate Kid and we're the Legion of Superheroes. Or
Yeah.
when this is a good example of it where Superboy takes that same sort of exuberance and whatever to Damien, and he goes, they're really cool and they have their tags and they all do poses. They all pose like Power Rangers. Right? And then Damien's like, really? He goes, well, and then Damien's like, well, I guess we do that too. Yeah, that's part
Yeah.
of being a superhero, right?
Yes.
Like posing,
Yes.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, exactly. What you just said. The word occurred to me too. But you said it. The exuberance of youth. That's what I get from this. We're our complaints aside, Bendis is hitting that. He is on top. He's got his thumb on that one, and that's totally working for me.
Right.
I love that part.
And they do it in a way that feels it feels right. Like when Brainiac 5 has Chameleon stay behind where he sends everybody out of the lab, but he says to Chameleon like, how does he word it? I forget what issue it is. Let me see.
Brainiac 5 says, Reap, I'm sorry, you and I haven't had more time together. And then he just looks at him.
Mm-hmm.
He gives him a look. And Chameleon Boy is like, you are the smart one, but don't you think there's stuff going on that might need our attention? And again, Brainiac just gives him this. It's not accusatory. It's not.
He's just waiting.
Yeah.
He's like
yeah. Because Brain 5 is like 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
But Chameleon Boy is not that far behind because he does realize what Brainiac 5 is. I can't think of the right word to describe the way that Sook drew his face.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's kind of like, come on, like I know you're hiding something.
Yeah, you want to. I know what it is you're hiding. You want to tell me,
but you need to say it.
You need to say it.
Yeah, and then he says, "Yes, my mother is the president." And yeah, right, because there's someone in the Legion that has insider knowledge about the president, and it's Chameleon, just like in the old mythos. Yeah, that was fun. I also really liked, because we had a question of whether this character really existed or not, when Invisible Kid popped up. And it's
a couple times.
Yeah, it's the Jacques Vicar Invisible Kid, not the Lyle Norg version.
Except in Millennium, it was Lyle.
Oh, was it?
Yes, apparently. Yes, he mentions his name specifically in that group shot at the end of issue 2.
Okay.
Of Millennium, and apparently that was a mistake, and they have since corrected that in the trade.
Oh,
probably the digital version. I meant to go look that up, but it was always supposed to be, or at least retconned to always supposed to have been Jacques instead of Lyle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was interesting though about it, where he pops out, and because they're like, was it about the trident? Somebody stole the trident. They're like, well, maybe that Invisible Kid, because we don't really know where he's at, right?
Shadowlass made a disparaging comment about
and then
the invisible guy.
Yeah, and he pops up and he goes, I'm right here.
Yeah.
But he also makes a comment of something like, you people all talk too loud. Like, I guess not only is like his people invisible, but I don't remember what issue it was, but not only that, but that maybe his people don't talk because they're invisible, right? Like they're just all, that's like part of the invisible thing. I don't know. There it is right there. He goes, why are you always talking behind my back? My name was Jacques Vicar, the invisible gentleman, not kid, no kid. Oh, he calls them talkers, right? Because he's invisible. He doesn't talk.
Crot talkers, yeah.
Yeah, crot talkers. I sort of took it as maybe his species doesn't talk that much, or maybe his, whatever. I don't know where he's from. I don't know. Does it say Earth? Because if it says Earth, then it doesn't on his fic tag or whatever the heck those things are called.
I don't have my glasses, Peter. I can't read that. It's too small. Yeah, he's from Earth. It says Earth.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe that's not the case. But still, I thought that was fun. That's very similar to Mark Waid and Kitson with Atom Girl, with Shrinking Violet Atom Girl, where they don't believe she exists because she's always small.
Oh, I forgot about, yes,
And then it
yes.
becomes a plot point where she actually shows up and you're like, oh my God, she's real. See, I kind of think they should have kept Lyle Norg and Jacques.
Yes, I
Put
thought the same thing.
Yeah, they're invisible. Who cares? Like, maybe they just swap out, like that'd be great.
Like twins in a weird sort of way. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that was fun. I did appreciate that. That was quite enjoyable. Okay. Do you have any thoughts about the covers?
I mean, I love the first issue. That was the print that they put out that Sook did, and I was able to get a copy of.
For me as well.
Yeah, and generally they seem to be, well, I was gonna say they get busier and busier, but actually they don't, because there's so many characters on most of these covers, except I guess for the last few. But I mean, they're nice. I don't know.
They speak to the interior,
yeah,
what's going on, somewhat.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
And I also,
I have a problem with the way that Sook draws eyes, because there's a lot of characters that have the same exact shape and expression in their eyes. So on the covers, especially. So
maybe it's because it's future. Remember, there's Superboy says to Damian, it smells different. Light bounces off of things differently, right?
Yeah, that could be.
Maybe their vision.
What do you think of the logo design on? So it's all the same with that slanted logo going across the top left corner to the right.
Yeah. Really just a focus on the Legion symbol more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to make it look different because it's a book about the future, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Giving it a different design. If it sits on a rack, that's probably the only thing you're going to see sticking out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I bought some of the alternate covers, as I was saying to Eric before we started recording. There's two really lovely Jim Chung ones, one focusing on the Trinity, one focusing on...
I should have got that one.
On the whole team,
Oh, yeah, dang.
And then a third one also for issue 3, also with Superboy, right up in the center,
Yeah.
Then they get into, I should have looked up who, right, it's right here. Covers by Alex Garner, who has a much softer presentation to the books.
Oh, yeah.
There, right. The problem is they all kind of look the same.
The same. Yeah, well, that's I think that's kind of my complaint with the main Sook cover. Well, Sook didn't do all those covers.
No, Travis Moore did some.
Yeah, so the Sook ones definitely have a sameness about them, whereas the other I guess is it just 2? Is it 4 and 6 that are not Sook covers?
Yeah, 4 definitely, and 6 is by... That's by Sook.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because the eyes. I can see that now.
It's just 4.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, there is a sameness to it, but...
Yeah.
Oh, damn, Peter. Now you're going to make me go buy some more covers to issues I already have.
Don't do it. Don't give in. Print it out and then just save yourself the money. Any small points that we didn't hit, like in the issues? Is there anything that stuck out that you just want to make mention of? Or I'm not sure how the listeners are going to handle this episode. We jumped around because we
were all over the place.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Like I wrote little things like, in issue 1 in Planet Gotham, there was a whole bunch of little bat emblems all over the place that I didn't notice the first time I read it.
Oh, I totally missed that.
Yeah, they're all like in the sewers. You get to see little bat all the sewers are designed like bad stuff.
Well, don't they also make the comment that Planet Gotham is like the safest place in the galaxy?
Yeah. Somebody made mention of the Gem World Crisis crystals or something like that, which is a tie to Young Justice.
There are little things like that all peppered throughout this 6 issues, right? What? There's something I was just gonna say. In relation to, again, I don't know. We talked about this specifically, but about the whole idea of the universe rebooting and the connection to the past. And Brainiac 5 also says something about when Earth broke into pieces, so did its already rebooted and revised history and timeline. So just again reinforcing that, my initial thought was that I have in my notes here was this is how Legion of Superheroes Millennium, that 2-issue mini, is tied to this book. Not directly because we don't see it on the page, but for some reason that comment by Brainiac 5 made me think of that.
Oh, and then in that same issue where Madam Honor President is trying to sell the idea of the Legion of Superheroes to the larger United Planets, she shows images of the 21st century heroes, or by showing the cover to JLA #1 by Morrison and Porter, and then showing New Teen Titans #1 by Perez.
Yes, yeah. I thought that was an awesome way to, it's the age of heroes, yet the JLA are not exactly representative of the youth aspect of that is the Legion, right?
Right.
And so having the Titans there, that makes a lot of sense, even though, the focus seems to be on the Justice League. And then also, what issue did you say that was in? 5? Also in that issue, when Brand is talking to the United Planets representatives about this Legion idea, she says about the youth, these young people, they want us to listen. They want us to inspire. And I thought, my God, that seems to me to be what the youth of today are, how they're feeling about the quote unquote leadership that they have, messing with their lives. They at least that's I see that. Maybe I'm just projecting, because I want our leadership to listen and to inspire, not just screw up everything as they have been.
Boy, issue 5 really is probably the most important issue outside of issue 1. Here's another brainy quote. Time is not a straight line, it is a concept. Reality is not stuff, it is a concept. We live in multiple dimensions and concepts simultaneously and always have. Just enjoy your space. In other words, just enjoy what you have, what Legion book you have now. Because he even goes on to say, all you need to know is if Superman fails in his world, we disappear in ours. Reality disappears. That's again, which is true, right? All the way back. We're about ready to get to that with the Byrne Superman, right? When they got rid of pre-crisis Superman, it affected the Legion of Superheroes, right? And that's always the case. Always the case. So
the other thing, another, I guess, criticism is that, the Legionnaires talk about how important it is that Superboy is there with them then. But I don't get a sense of what that is supposed to be. Why is he important? Beyond just being the founder of the United Planets, or at least the inspiration for it, right?
Right.
It seems to be more than that. And in fact, whatever issue it is that Triplicate Girl opens up with, no, I'm sorry, it's the Dawn Star issue. That we have a plan. What is that plan? What are we building up to besides this crisis type stuff that we've been talking about?
Well, I mean, I think, again, to go back to issue 5, right before what I read, Brainiac says, when he's talking about that they need to, um, the Legion needs to bring United Planets founder John Kent here to be part of it. He is the one to teach us everything we need to know to inspire a proper new age of heroes. We need to have him experience the future and all we have built, and we need to prepare him for his coming role as the one true Superman. He needs our perspective and we need his. So it's almost
okay.
Right? Like they're saying we bring him here because he is all of those things, but we bring him here so we can send him back with everything that we have so that he then can become the one true Superman.
So isn't that just self-serving? Because is this future the
not if Superman is tied to reality? You got to make sure he's, because if this one true Superman doesn't learn, then their world ceases to exist. So right. Yeah, it's self-preservation.
but is this the future that is needed or deserves to be in existence? Because based on what we've seen, while it appears that this 31st century is a pretty good place to live in, at least if you're in the United Planets, perhaps, its leader has ulterior motives. At least Saturn Girl perceives them that way. So, and there's obviously, we see some strife between the Legion and the bureaucracy, the president. So, is this? Are they worthy of this future? I don't know. It's just a stray thought that came to mind when you brought that up. So,
well, DC wants to do a Legion animated series, so it has to be worthy.
Well, that I was gonna ask you about that too, because it seems like they brought Bendis in. He took over Superman. He launched these other things, including Legion of Superheroes. It doesn't appear like it's landed as they wanted it to, and yet they're keeping it around here with the new miniseries. And is it because of that? Because of that potential? Yeah. We don't even know if it's been greenlit yet, animated series.
But they've also shown up in Young Justice, right? Like just here and there. I thought I saw an image of Phantom Girl that looks very similar to this one.
Oh, I don't recall that.
Yeah. And if they are working on a Legion cartoon, Bendis just said they wanted to. If they are, animation takes a long time, so they're like, okay, well, we got to stick with these Ryan Sook designs because that's what's
yes,
up.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
and well, so like I said, it didn't maybe land like we want, right?
Yeah.
They're not gonna reboot it so quickly. I mean, we as readers we're gonna chafe against that too. So there's no they can't make us happy.
No.
No matter what they do.
No. Now it's I'm sure I'm sure by the time this episode we release this, Brian and I have done another CGS episode, and we go into this whole conversation of this is a lot of what happens in our nostalgia media or in our big franchises. Star Trek wants to mine the few years that they have yet to mine somewhere before TOS, but now with Discovery, somewhere between Enterprise and TOS, they want to explore that, right? Mm-hmm. Star Wars wants to now mine everything between, the end of the original trilogy and the beginning of not the original, the episodes 1 through 3 and 4, 5, between 3 and 4, right? Mm-hmm. Like they just, everything's got to be Skywalker, Tatooine, Skywalker, Force, Yoda. And it's like, can we move on? Can we just move on?
No.
Star Trek Next Generation did it. Can we just move on? I mean, they did. Sure, they did. 100 years in the future. I mean, come on. Sure, they had bones on the first episode, and they eventually brought back, Spock and all that. But it was a new era. They at least didn't go backwards like Discovery did. You
That,
know,
yeah,
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 and
but
Strange New Worlds going
but
backwards.
but it's still more the same in one way.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it is more the same. That's what I'm talking about. Like
Oh,
it's
okay.
them going back to the well
I
as
see. Yes, yes.
opposed to just go change it, make it different. Like make Legion different. Make all these things different. Like
But
I
but
want different.
how how does that how do you make that work? If you make it too different, then it's not even that thing. So just call it something else, right?
Is this Legion? I mean, we got, just because
Ooh,
we got Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, and Cosmic Boy, and they saved Brand, like, and they're
yeah.
inspired by this. But is it Legion? When more than half of the Legion fans are like, no, I don't want to read it.
See, yes, it
Is
is
it still
Legion.
Legion? Okay.
I don't have a problem with this new version. What I have a problem with is the storytelling. But the concepts are there,
Is it all there? Okay.
and well, I don't know if it's all there, but there's
Enough
enough
of it.
there. There's enough there
Sure.
to make me interested. And I just like any other just like any other rebooted Legion, it has its own personality and callbacks and direction different from what came before. And I think that's okay. All of that's okay as long as the storytelling is strong.
If Bendis would have given us a stronger person to make that trip from the 21st century to the 31st century, not Rose, but someone else, this book really would have been interesting if it was told from their perspective and not from the Legionnaires' perspective. Like they were looking at the Legionnaires and
Yeah.
and maybe Superboy is part of it. Maybe she brings Superboy into it somehow, and they have to learn and investigate.
Yeah, maybe that was the hubris of Bendis, was that he was like, okay, we're doing this, and Rose is that character, and I could just see DC editorial going, yeah, we don't want to do that.
Right.
It's not enough. She's not enough. She's not recognizable. She's not what you're trying to make her out to be, even though they put out 2 issues really focusing on her before the launch of this book. It's a weird. I would love to know the conversations that were had in the development of this particular story and series.
And Bendis is on contract to write a certain amount of books, and an editor is not necessarily going to stand up and try to sway things because it is Bendis.
Yep.
Or
sure
maybe
I'm sure there's a certain amount of that going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Or what if this book was not only Superboy, but like 3 other new characters to the Legion, and we got, so that there's more people asking questions and kind of like in our Baxter run, that we got those 5 new heroes, and a lot of the story sometimes is told through their perspective, or like through Sense Girl or Polar Boy or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to rewrite, and these issues are already out, so it's a boring thing. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't really have any other notes. The artwork's really nice, and
would you recommend this if somebody says, Peter, I love the Legion, I'm listening to the Legion Project podcast, should I read this Sook Bendis Legion?
Have they ever read Legion before?
Well, let's answer that question either way.
I would not give this to a person who has never read Legion before.
Okay.
I would not give this to a person who has read Legion and maybe disappeared from the Legion. Of like, should I read that? I'd be like, no.
Really?
Go read the Wade and Kitson stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that for sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I'd even go read the Archie stuff before I'd read this.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I agree with you. As much as I would love to, be the cheerleader for this new Legion book, I think that it's a stretch too far.
Yeah.
To give to either of those concepts.
I even think this is probably like if we had to rank all the reboots and all the major or the major creative team shifts, right? Like if you think Paul Levitz and Giffen, the Beer Bombs and Giffen, Abnett and Lanning with Olivier Coipel, Barrett, Wade and Kitson, Johns and Frank. I bet you'd even say Johns and Frank were, read them before that. Like this is at the bottom.
Wow.
It just is. And again, it's not because it's terrible. I just feel like it's a little too hard to read for this concept. The thing about the X-Men thing that you talked about with Hickman, the reason why it works is, as you mentioned, Hickman is good about using characters for specific things.
Yes.
But also, there are multiple X-Men titles. That's kind of defeating my point. But the X universe does get spread out. Like you can go, I'm going to read this. This is the only book you can read the Legion in at that time.
Yeah.
So it's like throwing somebody into the deep end of an ocean. Like, good luck.
No pun intended there.
Yeah, right. So where would you?
Oh no.
Yeah.
No. I would want to help them, to get into it, because I want to support this book, these characters, these concepts that I love so much. But yeah, I would reach towards something else first.
Yeah.
If it was, especially if it was a new person.
Ooh, that's a not a good endorsement to end on.
No. So, well, okay. So let's try to turn that around to a more positive thing. Despite our, we criticize out of love, not because we hate this thing. Perhaps the next 6 issues will turn us around.
We have 6 to go. Right. Exactly. Speaking of that, so Eric and I, we are going to do another Tales episode after this episode. We have something in the works that I don't want to talk about just yet, that we're leading towards. The reason why we're doing a Tales, and we're going to do another one. We have a couple of things the next Tales might be. We're not sure just yet. Eric and I will talk about it. I don't know. We hadn't planned on jumping to the next 6 issues right away because of schedules and some other things, but who knows? Maybe we need to, because we're like, we need
to get this over with.
Yeah, right. To get over, or to maybe make it, so we'll see. Well, Eric and I will talk about that, off mic. Maybe we need to, redeem this episode. I don't know. For whatever reason. But just know, this is Tales number 9. We're going to do Tales number 10. That'll be the next episode. Before we get back to the Baxter run. And when we get back to the Baxter run, maybe by then we'll talk about what our plans are, why we're doing, why we're jumping back and forth. But whatever we decide for the next Tales, we'll definitely announce it on Twitter, so that if people want to respond or whatever, they can, depending on what it is. You'll want to pay attention to that. So, okay. Anything else?
I think we've kicked this dog enough. That was a horrible. Peter, cut that out.
No, I'm going to leave it in. We should say too, as Eric mentioned, there are trades. So if you want to read this, it's also on the DCU app. So there's a way to read it without, if you've already paid for the app, you can. The whole entire run is on the app, which is nice. So you can go check it out for yourself. And let us know if you're like someone who hasn't read this, if you're a Legion fan and you haven't read it, and you let us know if you have different opinions. Especially if you have a different opinion. I would love to hear that. The different opinion is what I'm trying to say. Right. Which I already said. Just a contrary approach or viewpoint. That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah. Because I
I feel bad now, Peter, by how much we've criticized this series so far.
We say all the time, if we don't like something, we're not going to like it.
Mm-hmm,
we're not going to, and it's not even like we could convince each other that we liked these ones. You know, we often are we are just honest about our opinions. That's something. Just you know, it's one thing if we get into an issue, like if you don't like an issue or I don't like an issue, and then we start talking about it, we're like, oh, okay, now I like it a little more. And there are parts of it, to be fair. That issue, now that after we talked about it, I do think issue 5 is a very important issue, and I may want to read it again in light of all the other stuff going on in DC. But I don't think we convinced each other that these 6 issues are super, super amazing. And maybe the hope is now that we know what these foundational issues are, when we go and we've recorded an episode, when we read the next 6 and you've already read them before, okay, let's see what happens. You know, we have something to compare to now. So I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair. Nobody wants to listen to, I can't listen to podcasts that are constantly positive all the time.
Yeah.
You know? So, okay. All right. So you can send us comments, peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
And as I mentioned, watch our Twitter. Once this episode drops, we will then, by the time this drops, we will have an idea of what we're doing for the next Tales, and we will let you know. And we hope you join us for that episode.
Yes, please.
All right. Eric, have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.